What was the first meal you ate when you got out of prison?
The first meal I ate was Korean barbecue.
Nice.
Korean barbecue. It was in Rolling Heights, I remember. Paroled at a CRC Norco, and the closest place was Rolling Heights at that time.
Hey, but that was like what you're like, dude, when I get out of here, I'm gonna get Korean barbecue. That's what you're thinking about the whole time?
No, they were like, let's go to all you can eat. And I'm like, oh yeah. And they're like, variety of food. And at that time when I got out, it was Hometown Buffet. Do you guys remember Hometown Buffet? Yeah.
Kind of bad.
They were trying to get me to go to Hometown, but then it was like, no, let's go to Korean barbecue. I actually forgot what it was called, but it was in Rolling Heights.
How delicious was it?
It was amazing. I was eating it, I almost started crying. Seriously, it was bad, man. It was like I couldn't. I was like sad but happy. It was hard to explain.
Once you got free, like what was on the food list? Like what were you eating every day? What were you trying to do?
Okay, so that night I got hungry again and I ate McDonald's. Like I don't know why. Like McDonald's Filet-O-Fish, fire. That spongy bread. Oh yeah, that was good.
What's your McDonald's order?
Usually it's either a Big Mac with fries, like the Big Mac combo, or Filet-O-Fish.
Like now, how often do you still eat that order?
I don't eat that anymore. I'm trying to be healthy. Dude, last time I had Filet-O-Fish was like 4 years ago.
Hey, low key, the Filet-O-Fish freaks me out because it's like fast food, seafood. What?
It's
How does that
good.
make sense?
The sauce, the tartar sauce, the bun that never rots away. It's
Yeah,
like
nah,
Jesus
man.
bread. Just never, manna that never rots. So good.
So we have a very special episode today. And well, first of all, hit the intro.
Welcome, guys, to the Unlearned Wisdom Podcast by Johnny Chang. We are on episode 2 now, and it is a core of the heart produced podcast. It's gonna dive deep into not just the Bible, but just everyday things that you can apply to your life. It is Unlearned Wisdom.
Nice. And today is a very special episode. Just to quickly introduce ourselves, what's your name?
I'm Aaron. I help with a lot of the social media and technology stuff.
Nice. And my name is Jeremy. I live in Johnny's basement. He lets me out every 24 hours for a little bit of sunlight. But, you know, when I first met you, like everybody knows you from that really incredible Soft White Underbelly interview. But as I've gotten to know you over the years, you became a Christian 8 years before that, right?
Yes.
And so in that 8-year gap, I think that there's, you know, in just talking to you over many, many months, I've learned so much more of really how you got to this point in your life. And I thought that it would be a really interesting episode if I asked you a bunch of questions and you really kind of told the story of how you got to be this Johnny Chang today that everybody sees as a very strong spiritual leader.
Yeah. So the 8 years before started with obviously me getting out of prison, and a lot of people know my story, know my testimony. Went to prison at 12 all the way to 25. And, you know, I had a lot of compounded trauma. I was in California Youth Authority, then went to, prison, level 4 yard, level 3 yards. And yeah, when I got out, my mom, she, convinced me to go to church. And through that, I was able to then move into the church when I met my pastor, which was Pastor Kim. And he preached the gospel to me, freed me from all of the trauma, almost like overnight.
Well, hold up. We're skipping a couple steps here. But first things, before we get into the details, like what are your, for the audience that's new, what's your credentials?
I'm a minister.
Yeah,
Yeah,
nice.
I'm a prison minister, also an international chaplain. So I get to go to prisons, convalescent homes, hospice. And I have my own digital congregation too. So, yeah, and I guess we have to slap the title of like influencer now.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess Christian social
hybrid
influencer. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Philanthropist. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. But yeah.
Yeah,
If Jesus was alive today, would he be an influencer? He has so many followers.
Facts.
Yeah.
He would be the influencer.
yeah,
Yeah.
true. So for those that are, this is the first time they've tuned in episode 1, Johnny tells a really good story about the first time he really experienced or felt like he saw God or experienced God. But can you give a quick synopsis? What was that first moment that you felt like you were talking to God or you were hearing from God?
When I met my pastor, just how he was able to break down my heart and show me all my blind spots, show me how empty I was, and also how normal it was to be empty. So that was something that I was like, if this man is not from God, I don't know what it is, because he's, like I said in the last episode, he had like the antidote, I felt like, to free me from everything.
And then at that point, you said, how long was it till you moved into the church? And who suggested that first?
About a year after.
Oh, it was a full year.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were going to church every week, though?
Yep. I was going to church every week. I was still kind of one foot in, 1 foot out type of thing, because I was still part of the gang. So I was on the process of graduating. Like, I never dropped out, which means like, hey, I denounced the gang or whatever. And that was what was cool about the pastor, was he was like, you don't have to denounce them. And I was like, this is interesting. Because everyone I've ever met, even in prison, they were like, you got to denounce your hood. You got to let it all go. But I told my pastor, my cousins, my brother, my uncles, it's a generational thing. Like, we've been in prison, in not just prison, but in this gang for like generations. My gang started in the 60s. And so, yeah, we have like generations in it.
Okay, so you're actively in a gang but going to church once a week. So what are you doing the other 6 days of the week? Like, do you have a job? Like, is it all gang life? Like, what does your life look like at this point?
So the year before that, I was still like selling drugs and stuff. So carrying a gun, I was obviously stacking my money. So I was actually living off of my saved money, if you will. Yeah. And that I wasn't working. I tried to like get a job, obviously having like 2 strikes. It was really hard. I'm a violent offender at this time, still on parole. I mean, I had like homies, make me like checks and stuff like that. But yeah, I didn't have an actual job.
And so at this point, were you removed from making money in the gang? Like, did you have an income, basically?
No, I didn't have an income during that time, because I pretty much wanted to like give my life up to God. So yeah, I just kind of stopped doing all of that stuff. Like, I felt weird. Like, I couldn't preach the gospel and then also be selling drugs. And I touched a lot of white, so like, powder, and I would sell that, and I felt kind of guilty doing all of that.
Wow. Wait, so you go to church on Sunday, and the pastor slowly, you're like, I want to live a better life. I felt an experience I've never felt before, and you're not working either. So what are you doing with that time? I'm just trying to like get a sense of like.
So we actually had 3 services. We had 2 services, and we had 1 regional service. So it would be technically 3 services. So Wednesday would be our middle of the week service, started at 7:30. I would go there. Fridays were regional services, where we met with people that were like a brother or a deacon or an elder in the church. We'd meet them at their house. And then Sunday was the actual Sunday service. And during those times, when I was at home, which I thought was really cool, was ministers would come to my house, like minister, who's now a pastor, John Choi. He came and he would just fellowship with me. We would read the Bible together, and then he would tell me his stories. He's actually from a rival gang, but he's in Dallas. He's based out of Dallas, Garland, Texas. But our gangs beefed it at that time. And so he would come and he would share the word with me. He would take me out to eat. I mean, we just spent a lot of time together. So it actually made it easier for me to transition into moving into church, because he lived at the parsonage. He lived at church. So,
but what were the reasons that led up to the point where pastor was like, hey, you should move in? Were you like was it like, yo, move in so you could become a minister? Or there was another reason he was like, hey, this is why I think you should?
I would fellowship with pastor once a week. I would meet him once a week, and we'd have our little chats, but we'd have actual set dates of talking to the pastor once a week. And he was essentially mentoring me, stewarding me. He never mentioned anything about ministry. He never mentioned anything about moving into the church until I said, hey, pastor, it's kind of hard because I'm chilling with my homies still. We're going out. And the way that the gang life is, you have to put in work, even if your homies are there and you're not even involved in it. So if somebody, let's say, jumps somebody, you have to participate. Even if you know a person. Like, if I've been to prison, so I know all the people who've been to prison, and there are rival gang members, but there are ops, as they say, are enemies. But in prison, you guys have this unity, because especially in California, it's a race thing. So all the Asians and the others would roll together, And they would literally be prison politics like that. And when they get out, then it becomes street politics, which is kind of stupid. But I would see them, and if there were issues on the streets, I would have to participate. So I remember telling my pastor, like, this is kind of tough because I'm trying to level up, but I'm with my homies and I can't, like, my brother's still active at that time. My youngsters and my cousins and my uncles, they're all active. So I didn't know how to navigate all of that. And I was like, they can't stop being my brother. Like, my brother can't stop being my brother. My cousins can't stop being my cousins, even if I denounce the gang. When we have family meetups, we're all there anyways. So it was very tough. And I went to pastor with that. I was like, Pastor, what do I do? And he was like, Johnny, I think you don't have a person who can manage your life. Like, you can't manage your life very well. He was just honest with me. He's like, I think you should move into the church and learn spiritual life. That's the first time I heard this term, spiritual life. And he's like, because the spirit bleeds into everything else. So spirit will affect your mental, spirit will affect your emotional health, spirit will affect your physical health too. And he kind of used an analogy where he said, even if, let's say, you have a lot of money, but if you're not, and let's say you're even healthy, but you're spiritually like off, you're sensitive to, just negativity and things like that, then that will bleed into everything else, right? So he said spiritual health is it should be top priority, essentially. And so through that, I just kind of took a leap of faith and I was like, all right, let me move in. But there is one thing that I did, and I still, because I had enemies on the streets, for the year after that, while living in church, I was still carrying a gun, and pastor didn't know this.
So, like, was your gang and cousins and family kind of accepting of the fact that you wanted to do this walk with Jesus, or were you feeling pressure from both sides? Like, the pastor saying, hey, you should come do this, and your gang saying, hey, no, you need to stay and do this, or how did that go?
After converting to Christianity, of course, the gang had some kind of resistance to it because, first and foremost, most of them were Asian and they're Buddhist. By tradition, Asians, Chinese especially, are Buddhist. So when they heard that I was Christian, they automatically knew, like, okay, this dude is like he sipped the Kool-Aid, basically. He's crazy. They would say things like, why would you worship a white Jesus? And I would fight with them. He's not white, he's Jewish. And they're like, same thing. These are, again, a lot of my uneducated homies out there, right? But they were basically saying that. And at first, there was even like a rumor going around, like, Johnny's like, he's weird now. He's doing drugs. He's talking about how he's righteous. And they would laugh. They would be like, dude, he's righteous. I was there with him doing like the most evil things. Like, he took me under his wing. He took me to do missions. And so there was that pull. And then there was pastor who was like also kind of challenging me. Like, you should really live for the gospel. You should live for spiritual life. God will provide everything. And I'm just like, I need money. I also built this, I guess you could say, career where I gave my whole life to my gang. And I have accolades. I stood 10 toes down. I was solid. I hit the main line, general population, never rolled it up, never PC'd, never snitched. And so there was an internal struggle of like, man, am I going to lose my manhood and pretty much, like, for lack of a better term, like my career?
Your street cred.
My street cred. And so I was very back and forth with these things. And I was like, man, this is tough.
Yeah. You spend your whole life building something, and now you're basically going to start over in a new thing.
Yeah.
So.
He was like the LeBron of the streets.
You guys know I stress the importance of being deep in your word. So we do that every Saturdays at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time in our deep dive Bible class. We go from Genesis to Revelations. We're currently in Leviticus. So all the symbols, all of these unlocks, you guys don't want to miss out. I hope you guys enjoy. It's at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time at coreoftheheart.com every Saturday. And remember, starve the flesh, feed the spirit. See you guys later.
It's very interesting how a pastor was like, you need to learn how to live spiritual life. So moving into the church, how does your schedule change?
So that was Early morning, we would wake up 4:30, and I remember just like being so angry my first week.
Well, can you describe what the living quarters are like? It's not like you have your own room and a TV and
No, it's cottages. So when Pastor told me to move in, they had this crazy schedule. You don't have a place to sleep where it's like your own bed. It's literally a cottage. And it was giving me a little bit of PTSD because I was in YA, which was California Youth Authority, and there's cottages. So it's like dormitories, if you will, right?
just like bunk beds in a room,
Just
an open
beds
room.
in a room. Yeah, think of like the military, and they have a cottage, and you're just like that. You have like a little like, I guess not a dresser, but it's like one of those IKEA like clothing racks, and each one it's very kind of like militant, if anything. And so I lived there, and it was weird. You know, there was like all men, obviously, in the top quarters. And this time we were in Koreatown, so our church had like these little rooms and bunks as well. But I got the cot. So
How many people are sharing the room?
I think in one room it was like 20 people, maybe 15 to 20, if I recall.
How old are these people?
A lot of them are missionaries, so they were around like 20s, mid 20s, I would say, to like late. There was one guy who was like maybe 28, like late 20s, but that was rare.
There was no like crusty old man.
Nah. These are all missionary, short-term, what we call short-term missionaries. Yeah, I knew a guy from Africa, from Uganda. There was a guy from Korea, barely spoke a lick of English. There was some person from Brazil. Like, it was just basically people that we were sending out or were coming to America as like the mission field.
Dude, what? Imagine what they were thinking when he walked in. They're like, "Hey, this is the new guy." Like,
I wasn't as tatted back then though, and I was bald-headed.
I mean, you still don't look friendly.
True, I didn't look. I actually looked more meaner. I wasn't friendly when I walked in because I thought I was gonna get my own spot. But I remember Pastor sitting me down and saying, "When you do move in, I want you to understand, like, you know, we definitely break the flesh here." And that's the first time I heard, "Starve the flesh, feed the spirit." So I was like, okay. And he goes, "You know, we're gonna wake up at 4:30 in the morning. Johnny, it's okay. You know, this is gonna be good for you. You don't see it right now, but you're gonna see it later."
What is your flesh saying in that moment where you're like, "Ah, this is a bad idea"?
To be honest, I was never a person who thought deeply. So I was like, it's not that bad. That's what got me in prison. Carrying this gun, it's not that bad. Do a line of coke, it's not that bad. Like, that actually helped me. I'm not gonna lie, because when I got there, I was like, oh man, I don't have a place to stay anymore. Like, it's either this or nothing back on the streets. And of course, I could have went with the homies and stuff, but I just knew. I just had no more like way. It was hard to explain. In my heart, I came to an end of myself, and physically and financially, I came to an end of myself. I was like, you know, it's either this or I'm going to run the streets and probably die. And I don't want that. And I just knew, like, I had no other way. I had literally no other way.
Wow. Okay, so give us the schedule. 4:30 a.m. wake up.
So yeah, as I move into the church, the schedule is kind of hectic. It's 4:30 in the morning, you wake up. We do a prayer meeting at about 5:30. And then we pray for about an hour, and then we do like an actual meeting where we do like a early morning service is what they call it. And then you eat breakfast. And then from there, we split into teams. We go and volunteer. We do Bible study. It just depends. What I would do was I was set to clean. I remember Pastor was like, you need to clean the toilets and you need to clean like. And I was just like, dang, this is crazy. This
Johnny
is like
the
prison.
janitor.
Yeah, this was like prison all over again, because in prison I was cleaning. And you know, in prison, like, you don't really have a mirror. Some facilities you do, correctional facilities, but like, you're supposed to shine up your toilet, shine up things really nice. And for me, I was able to see like my reflection. So that was like my mirror. So I was used to cleaning, like almost OCD status, you know? In prison. But then when I got to church, I was like, dude, like 20 to like people who don't have the same mindset, they're just like slobs, you know what I mean?
They had you cleaning, and
Yeah.
you hate. That was the first
So
time.
that
you
was
got
the
pissed.
first hurdle for me. Was like, okay, they're making me clean. And then I would have thoughts, you know, how come they don't make these other Korean ministers clean? How come they don't make these other ministers clean? And I started to judge. And I started to build kind of a little bit of like resentment, but I, like pushed it down inside of my heart. And I was like, maybe this is just what it is.
How long were they making you clean for?
Oh, I would have
Months?
to clean like twice a week, or no, 3 times a week for the first 3 months I was doing it.
Wait, and you were really like one of the only ones? Why would you?
No, there was other people too, but it was just hard for me because I was fighting my intrusive thoughts. I was like, I think pastor's making me do this because he doesn't like me. Yeah. And then I remember just kind of like avoiding pastor because I didn't want to like my old side to come out. It was like a very bad anger. Like I just blow up, I go from 0 to 100 back to 0. So I'm like, I'll just suck it up. And I remember him kind of like the second time was like, he kind of called me out on stage. Like you guys know, especially Jeremy, he likes to call people out. So he was like, we have this brother Johnny, he's like, and I was like, oh snap. Okay. And he goes, and he's such a good boy. He's so good. He doesn't want to get me angry. So he just holds everything in.
Well, he could tell.
He could tell. And he's like, and he doesn't, not one complaint. He's like a mouse, like running to his room, then running back out, then running to his room. He was saying that. And he goes, but, I wish I had an axe, like how you guys break open like a coffin or break open something to like expose it. And I had an axe I could just break his chest open so he can open his heart. And I was just like, what the heck? And I'm not gonna lie, part of me got angry, but the other part of me was like, oh wow, pastor does know. He knows that I'm avoiding conflict because I'm a good person. And so he's like, if Johnny just recognized 2 things, if he just recognized that he was made of dirt, which was, it says in Genesis chapter 2, and if he just looked in the mirror and reflected on his past, he wouldn't think he was a good person. He went to prison and, he was like kind of putting my business out there. But it was the first time that I felt this pit in my stomach and I just had to go and talk to him about that. So I sat there and I said, Pastor, why did you say that about me? Like, first and foremost. And he's like, because I know your heart. And it's really sad because you don't know your heart. You think you're a good person. You're trying to do good, but you don't recognize that you're not communicating. And then he said the same thing. When communication stops, relationships die.
Bar.
So I was like, okay, Pastor. He said, so open your heart. And that's the second time I heard open your heart. I didn't know these terms. Open your heart. What does that mean? Like physically open it up? And he was like, in order to open your heart, you must communicate. Then he gave analogies. Everything is like swamp water, for example. If you think about swamp water, it sits there. There's no water flowing into it. There's no water flowing out of it. So what happens to that water? It rots away. And it cannot sustain life. It rots away. It stinks, right? Likewise, your heart is kind of like this swamp water where you just hold everything in and you don't share anything and you don't receive anything, right? And if you try to drink that swamp water, it'll make everybody who drinks it sick. It's almost toxic and poisonous. Would you agree? And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, why is this guy talking about this, right? And then he goes, but you think about mountain spring water. What is the water doing? It's flowing. So it has a natural, yes, it hits, poop but it has its own filtration system. And the best tasting water is the mountain spring water, right? And even though it has rocks and crevices and blockages and things like that, but it's like your heart, right? If you share your heart, even though there's, difficulties and a branch and something blocking and thresholds and things, if you overcome that, then you will be like that best tasting water. You will live happier. You will be purified. So Johnny, I need you because your whole life, he's like, I understand that you were taught and trained to not say anything. But if you do that, you will rot away. It won't do anything to me. He's like, but for you, Johnny, you will rot. So I was like, oh, snap. Okay. So he said, just share little things. So he really nurtured me. He said, just share the small things, Johnny. Like whatever it is that you feel in your heart, just share it. Even if you're like, I don't want to share that.
So where did you start? What was the first thing?
The next thing I started, well, I didn't start that day. He's like, let's just end it here. And, take some time to think about it. And the next day in breakfast time, he's like, okay, Johnny, like, I need you to clean. And then I shared my heart. I said, Pastor, I don't mind cleaning, but like, can we tell these people to be cleaner? Because it's just like diarrhea splatter on the freaking thing is just, it's too much, bro.
Yeah, it's so gross.
You know? I'm like, bro, like, how do they miss the toilet seat? Like, how does it get on the seat, you know? Respectfully. And so I'm just like, dang, like, but it was just beautiful in that he's right. You know, he was always team me. But I think because in my life, I've never really had anybody be team me except for my homies. And they were obviously, you know, the gang life. So I could see that Pastor, one thing I could say was I connected to his heart that day when I saw that he was always team me. Like, Johnny, I want to help you. And I'm very thankful for that, honestly.
Wow, that reminds me of a time where you told me, like you had something to tell Pastor, but you didn't know if you wanted to tell him, and you didn't know how you wanted to get it across, and then he reminded you that you don't know my heart, you don't know how I feel about this. So what did you mean by that?
You know, Pastor, it was the same thing. Like, a lot of the times we have these preconceived notions about people. We think like they're going, like, oh, I already know how Pastor's going to answer. But actually, even if we do, he was trying to teach me that you have to open your heart. You have to go and ask. Just because you think you know something, it could be an assumption. And sometimes it could be different. You know, some people can feel differently about something. So he kind of told me, like, you know, don't have the I know demon, right? He's like kidding. He's like, you know, people have the Jezebel spirit, and he's just like joking, but he's like, the I know demon is like, I already know what they're going to say. I know. And what that does is it stops me from then having that flow and that connection and that communication. So he's like, even if you feel like you know, ask me. Even if you feel like you know what I'm going to say, confirm with me. And so, yeah, I learned that. Yeah.
What would you say to people that like hear this and they were like, well, I have tried and maybe I always get shut down and now I don't want to anymore? Yeah. What would you say would be helpful for them if they don't have a understanding person like Pastor, if they're around people that shut them down a lot?
Yeah, so I understand that too, because even amongst my own church, there are people who are more abrasive or less compassionate or empathetic as Pastor Kim, right? And so what I tell people and what I've been told is that if you are going to do that, you just have to think deeply about who is that going to affect at the end of the day. Because closing up, sure, may seem like it's good for the, like, temporarily, but overall, just like the swamp water analogy I use, you will start to rot away, and you will find other ways to self-soothe. You will find other ways to, like, offload. So I would say that, you know, that it's important to kind of continuously be open, because yes, you're going to be hurt, but life is not about avoidance. Life is about overcoming, right? A lot of people avoid things, right? If our bodies never got sick, for example, then we just lived in a bubble. Like, even the smallest things would give us pain, right? So Pastor always says, Johnny, you have to overcome things, not avoid things. The second thing is why I'm so big on our community, why I built the Discord, why I built these types of, you know, platforms to help people, is because I understand not everyone is going to have a Pastor Kim. I legit lucked out, you know, but at the same time, this is why God gave me the heart as a servant to serve in this way. Like, of course, you know, social media is huge. Why wouldn't we utilize it for doing our one-on-ones, for doing our Bible studies? Like, might do the main stages for free. I do the lives for free because I'm always trying to pour into people, right? So I think it's important to recognize that you can't make a whole religion, I guess, or a whole group of people pay for one or two people that you came into contact with. You know what I mean? Like, and they put a bad taste in your mouth. And I'm not saying that's not valid. It's, of course, I've been through experiences like that. I'll give you an example. I grew up in the green light era. So I grew up in this era where basically it was a silent war between the Mexicans and the Asians. And this was all over LA. And nobody really talks about it. I won't go too into detail, but essentially...
Go into detail. This is your podcast, man.
But there was essentially, you know, an organization that put a hit on all Asians, essentially. And, you know, everyone that was part of this conglomerate which is the Mexicans, they had to take off on anybody who was, in the county and in the prisons. So they had to give us our own gang modules. They had to separate us and anybody else that was, that was defiant against this particular organization. So we caught the heat of that. And so when I was younger, I had a lot of gunfights with Mexicans. I had a lot of fights with Hispanics. They shot at me, shot at them, stabbed me, stabbed them, all kinds of stuff. And so when I was growing up, naturally, I had like this discrimination towards them. And I had like a natural hatred towards them. But then they lifted this green light, kind of like in the late 90s, around that time. And, I get to prison and we're now kind of repopulating the prisons and kind of reincorporating all the races together. And I started to recognize something, this hatred that I had because one particular group of individuals did me dirty. And then I just hated the whole race essentially, right? And I'm not proud of that. But when I got to prison, I was able to see, man, they're just like us. They're literally, we all bleed red. They literally have the same background as me. A father who's never said, I love you, drunk father. Some people, that fathers that just left, even though my dad didn't leave, but I mean, he emotionally wasn't there, right? And mentally wasn't there either. So I was able to see, wow, we have literally the same backgrounds. We're the same people. It's just he's a different race, but we're literally the same. And then I started to get into their culture and I started to see, wow, they're very cultural. They're very family family oriented. And it was just beautiful. And now, obviously, I love, my Hispanics, but...
You love rice. They love rice.
Yeah, exactly. Fly rice, orange, what is it? Tomato rice? Rice is rice. No, but it was just, it's so beautiful that we're able to kind of come together. But that took me to then step out of the frame of thinking that was very narrow-minded, obviously. And I can't blanket everybody with something that one person did to me, right? So, or a few people did to me. So yeah, I would say, it's kind of sad how people get what I call church hurt, is they go to church and they go, man, these guys are telling me fire and brimstone. This other person's telling me I can't have tattoos. And it's really sad. And this is why we have our podcast, is because I think people need to understand that if you're not operating from a position of love, then all it's going to do is produce sadness, hate, and despair, right? You cannot cast hate out with hate, despair with judgment. You have to cast out hate with love. And so I think, that's really important for those people who are, thinking.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And just for those that are new listeners, again, we have a Discord. It's a free community. The link is in the bio. Sign up, and you can just meet a lot of amazing people that are on the same journey as you.
Yep.
So I want to go back to the early days. You mentioned one struggle, right? Opening your heart and just being open to the pastor. What were some of the early Christian struggles that you remember?
I would struggle a lot with if I was truly saved. That was a big one. I would question, am I really saved? How do I know I'm saved? And I would base a lot of it off of what I felt. So that day, if I felt like I was following pastor and I was not lusting and I wasn't drinking or stuff like that, or I wasn't with the homies, I would feel like, 9 foot tall. Yeah, this is what spiritual life is. And then the days that I didn't feel like that, I would fall into it. I'd watch porn. I'd, talk to a girl on the side or something like that. Then I would feel like, oh, I'm going to burn in hell. So it was this up and down, like happy, sad, sin, repent type of lifestyle. And even that, I was thankful for my pastor because he said, and he told me, you can never confirm your salvation amongst yourself. You have to always go to the book of life to confirm your salvation. And so at first I didn't understand what that meant. But essentially what it means is because he said, Johnny, you change every single day. You're happy one day, sad one day. Then the same day, you'll go from sad to happy again. So it's this constant up and down. If you trust what you see and you don't trust what the word of God says, then you're going to live continuously in this cycle, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. And that put something in my heart because I'm like, I don't want to waste my life living 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And some of us have, living this cycle. So I wanted to break free from that cycle. So pastor said, if you want to break free, listen to me carefully. That's what he said. Listen to me carefully. And he said, to break free from this sin, repent, happy, sad, up and down cycle is very simple. You have to think deeply about your thoughts, number one. And the second thing is your thoughts change while the word of God never changes. He says, if you focus on your thoughts, you will only be happy, sad, happy, sad. Because when you're feeling happy, you'll be happy. When you feel sad, very miserable, happy, sad, happy, sad. But the word of God, Johnny, never changes. It never changes. So if some guy says one thing, because you gang members are big on trust, he said, and if he says the same thing for 50 years, that's a trustworthy person. That's a man of his word, right? Likewise, this Bible is like this. If you feel bad, read that chapter, Hebrews chapter 10, verse 14, which is my saving verse. If you're not feeling perfect, read Hebrews 10:14 that says you're perfected forever. And utilize the word to start fighting your thoughts. And so he's like, and then he gave me another task after that. I want you to start reading the Bible. Read not to comprehend, but read to accept.
So you learned that, but what was the first time where it applied in real life? Let's say I watched porn, but then I finally pulled myself. Like, when was the moment that advice actually applied to your life?
There was one time where I had like an ex hit me up, and I remember kind of wanting a sneaky link with her, right? And I remember walking kind of out, sneaking out, and then I was like, wait a minute. Pastor said to think about your thoughts deeply, which means think about what this is going to result to, not just, oh, it's bad to sleep around. I don't care. I'm going to do it, right? That was my thought process before. But I started to think about my thought all the way till the end. Okay, so if I link up with this girl, what's going to happen, right? I think she was with somebody at this time, so that's going to cause cheating. And if this person finds out, how would that look like for me? I'm over here in church trying to better my life, yet I'm in the back sleeping around. And then that's going to cause me to close up to pastor. And I love pastor, so if I close my heart to pastor, then I won't be able to communicate with him, and then our relationship will die. And then from this, I'll end up back on the streets. I got to go to the homies because I'm going to look for love somewhere else. Then I'm going to be doing drugs and Hennessy back and forth like this. And I'll literally lose my life again. Because if I'm with my homies, we're going to get into something. It's just how it is. It's not if, but when, right? When are we going to get into the next shootout? When are we going to get shot at? When are we going to, hurt people or get hurt? And then I will lose my life. And I thought about it in that perspective. Wow. If I do just this one thing, right, it leads to all of these other issues. And then I was like, okay, but I don't have a Bible verse for this. And now the first time I actually remembered pastor's sermon the day before, he talked about 2 Corinthians 5:17. And basically what that says is, I am a new creature. All the old ways have passed. And then that allowed me to think, wait a minute. So the old Johnny, yes, he would sleep around, he would do drugs, he would do this instantly. This is like, why wouldn't he do it? This is, my thing. But if God is saying I'm a new creature and my old ways have passed, past tense, meaning it's gone, then where is this voice and this thought coming from? And I was able to apply it. Oh, this is from Satan. If I follow this, the evil spirit will lead my life, and I will never be able to overcome my thoughts, because as soon as he slips something in, I'm going to follow it. And that day, I remember it was so hard for me, but I was like, hey, I'm not going to come. I'm sorry. Please don't hit me up again. And I did this. And of course it was tough flesh-wise, but it was weird. My spirit was happy. I was like, wow, that word does give me power. And that was like a twofold lesson, because the second time, the second part of that was I was able to feel that freedom again in my heart when I didn't commit that, right? And I was like, oh, wow, I think if I live this way, constantly utilizing the word to fight my temptation, then I will always feel this peace. And so it sparked something in me to read the Bible. And that night I remember just reading the Bible to combat my thoughts and my feelings, and it really helped me. And then the next day I talked to Pastor about that. And I said, Pastor, I use 2 Corinthians, and he was so happy. He's like, Johnny, that's the start. That's the start. He's like encouraging me. And he was like, you should read the Bible. you need to learn to, and this was another lesson he taught me, you need to learn to replace your thoughts with the word of God. And he's like, if you don't do it, then you're only going to have your own thoughts and you're going to be spiraling in your own thoughts. And every single thought Satan gives you is just going to lead you down another path, rabbit hole after rabbit hole. And he said, so I need you to, read more often. And so I just remember picking up the book and it was like accelerated. I just kept thinking, carnally minded is death. My thoughts are not my thoughts. I need to replace them. And that's the first time he taught me about how Jesus fought. So, those people who struggled with anxiety, those people who struggle with lust, temptation, the way that I learned to overcome was through replacing your thoughts with the word of God. Now, if you don't read your Bible, how can you fight? And he said, my pastor said, even Jesus overcame temptation through who? Through the word. He didn't say, I rebuke you. He didn't pray it away. He said, it is written. So Satan, there's a famous story where Satan takes Jesus up on the mount and he says, turn these stones into bread, right? And Jesus says, it is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeded out of the mouth of God. What's so beautiful is even Jesus himself, who has all the power in the world, utilizes the word to fight Satan. He's giving us the blueprint. And that's what Pastor was teaching me. Johnny, the blueprint to fight your temptation. If you want to overcome lust, if you want to overcome temptation, if you want to overcome all of this anxiety, this crippling anxiety in your past, you must utilize the word, because even Jesus, the Messiah, used the word to fight Satan. If there was any other method, right, he would have shown us that was the method to overcome. And that was such a deep unlock for me that I was like, oh, I need to get in my word, because I have intrusive thoughts every single day, even now, right? So, yeah.
That's so crazy to me. You kind of answered it with Jeremy's question there, but it's so crazy to me because you used to say, and you still say that, you used to not think that deeply about things. You're like, oh, I wasn't really processing super deep thoughts back then. And I used to think, like, how does someone just flip the switch into processing super deep thoughts like you are now? But I was going to ask, do you think these lessons from Pastor are what attributed you to that switch of not thinking very deeply to thinking very deeply?
Yeah, I think what helped me think very deeply versus when I was just very surface level was these lessons that Pastor taught me, right? Thinking about your thought all the way to the end. And so that inadvertently, the byproduct of thinking about your thought until the very end is deep thinking, because no one thinks like that. No one goes, well, what will this do? And what's the end of this, right? Unless you're like business minded or whatever. And I wasn't. I had a GED education, was a gang member, spent, 13 years in the penitentiary.
Counts with his fingers.
I count with my 1, 2, 3, 4, count with my fingers, right? But as I seen that, I was able to recognize, wow, Pastor was teaching me how to, the lesson of deep thinking versus like overthinking. So I used to think I was, I kind of had this time in my life, this struggle where I was overthinking and I thought that was deep thinking. So even that, Pastor was teaching me that anything that's negative is always overthinking, right? Oh, that's not going to work. Words like these little trigger words he taught me, which is like never and always. Oh, it's always going to be like this. I always have bad luck, or I'm never going to make money. I'm
Sounds
never
like
going to. So he said those are very big trigger words that you can tell the posture of someone's heart, right? What's bleeding out of them. He says, but Johnny, like you have to learn to have like positive words of affirmation, right? Like even positive self-talk is very important. And so I think all of that coupled together by him telling me just that one thing, think about your thought till the very end and what is the end result, whether positive or negative, allowed me to just flip into this mode of every single thing that I do, whether it's business, whether it's Arizona trip, whatever it is that we do, even now, it still applies. I think about, if I say this to this person, what is the end result of this? If I follow my thought that I want to do a line of coke or, sleep with this girl, what is the end result, right? And that allows you to really think extremely deeply. And so, yeah, Pastor's the GOAT for that. He just, it's crazy.
There's so many like little lessons that you're taught along the way. Can you maybe think of the best ones? Like what were the best lessons that you learned in your early years from Pastor?
The number one best lesson is distrusting your thoughts. is the way that he explained our thoughts is like a intruder, right? It's kind of like, you know, because a lot of people have issues, especially in this world. You're taught, trust your thoughts, follow your heart, follow your thoughts, trust in yourself, believe in yourself. These are things that are like literally poured into us as children, right? And the number one thing was when Pastor said, don't trust your thoughts. Lean not on your own understanding, as it says in Proverbs chapter 3. And so I was shocked because I'm like, that was so foreign to me. Well, if I don't trust my thoughts, I would tell Pastor, who do I trust? I don't trust anybody else like to lead my life. And then he flipped the question on me. You led your life and you believe your thoughts are good. That's why you trust them. And I said, yeah. You don't have evil thoughts all the time. Would you agree? I said, yeah. He goes, then why did you live such an evil life if you trusted all of your thoughts? And I buffered. I was like, like I was shocked, you know? I was like, that's so true. I didn't like hearing that, to be honest, but I was just like, wow, that's true. He's like, did you plan to go to prison? You plan to join a gang and, you know, what was your plan? And I was just real. I was like, I plan to join a gang, have a mountain of cocaine, have a lot of pretty women, make some money. He goes, did that work out for you? And I was like, no, I ended up in freaking a place with all men. You know, I lived in a freaking gated community, but not the one I wanted to live. You know, and it was just crazy. So he was like, right. So your thoughts, Johnny, the issue is you don't know how evil your thoughts actually are. Because you're born flawed as a human being, you cannot truly see. Your lens is foggy, basically, is the way he explained it. You're going to look at things crookedly. And he's like, so you have to learn to distrust your thoughts. You have to retrain yourself. First time I heard him say this, you have to unlearn in order to truly learn. So all the things that you have, I want you to just like visualize like just junk and just leave it aside. So when Pastor says something, when I say something, he says, just follow what I say and you will level up without even recognizing it. And honestly, it still holds true today. Go to prison, for example. I'm like, I spent all my life staying out of prison. The doors slamming, the COs being mean to each other, seeing the homies, you know, and walking the line and staying in bounds and not out of bounds, all brings PTSD to me. There's sirens that go off when they put the yard down, brings PTSD to me. And I'm like, why would I ever? And then that's when I'm always telling myself, right? Wait, my heart says, I don't want to go here. But Pastor's words and the word of God says, distrust your thoughts. So I've learned to really distrust myself. And that's one of the main lessons. He also taught me that flesh is flesh. That's another lesson that I learned. He said, you know, for example, you don't want to sin, Johnny, and people don't want to cheat. But sometimes there are people who cheat. Like I've had friends tell me, bro, I don't even know why. Like I have the baddest girl here. And like some chick just comes over and she's not even that good looking and I cheated with her, bro. And now like it ruined my relationship. And so Pastor explained it like this. Flesh is flesh, meaning the Bible says all men are liars. The Bible says the flesh is corrupted. And he likened it to like the analogy of like eating. He's like, when you're full, you could be like, oh, I don't need to eat anything. But if you starve, he says, you will eat even like a potato that has mold on it. Right? Because you're starving. He says in one instance, Satan can slip in and make your flesh do certain things, right? And trick you just for that 1 second, like he did your friend. And you'll go and you'll cheat and then you'll finish and have this regret and be like, what the heck? And then he taught me, why do people regret? You know, why do people regret the things that they do if they wanted to do it? If we go out and we eat, you know, Pastor likes to eat like tteokbokki, you know, he likes to eat like a lot of Korean dishes. So we used to go out and eat Korean barbecue all the time. And he's like, we went to go eat Korean barbecue, for example, and we ate naengmyeon with that, right? The cold noodle. Did you regret it? I was like, no. And he's like, because you wanted to do that. And I was like, that's true. And he's like, but you messed up, you joined the gang and all that. Why you thought you wanted to do something during that time, but why did you regret it? It's proof that you didn't actually want to do that. There was something that tricked you and deceived you into doing those things. So he's like, you have to learn that flesh is flesh. So stay away from women, he told me. No matter how ugly they are, no matter they're not your whatever, your flesh is always going to desire the fleshly carnal things. And so I had to learn that too, because at church I was just like, what's wrong with hugging on sisters? You know, I'm so happy. What's wrong with like talking to...
Where's my hug at guy? He's
Yeah.
like, hey, happy Sunday. Didn't see a Bible study on Friday. Come here.
Yeah. What's wrong with, you know, speaking with a girl on the side when she wants to share something, you know, like her, or, you know, something she's struggling with. And I realized, like, man, because even pastor does that. It could be an old lady. It could be a pretty lady. He'll literally have a translator with him, or he'll have the door open, or he'll do it in a like a public space where people can hold him accountable. And it's because pastor, not that he doesn't, you know, trust himself or like whatever, he trusts in the word above his own flesh. And I saw even the lessons that he was teaching me when I just watched him, right? Like how he operated, how he carried himself, how he moved. I was able to see, oh my gosh, I see why pastor's doing that. You know, because people can make false allegations. He like sees, he has so much foresight. It's kind of wild. And he's poured all of that into me. And that's what I love about my pastor. I am not who I would be. There's no way I could be who I am without my pastor today. 100%.
That leads me to a perfect segue to this next question. Sure. There's pivotal leaders in your life that have changed you. Who were the other pivotal leaders that really made you who you are today?
Pastor Han and Pastor John Choi.
Yeah. List them all. So it starts with Pastor Kim, who you talk about all the time.
Pastor Kim, Pastor Han, and then Pastor John Choi. These three. They just, you know, Pastor John, again, was like a rival, you know, gang member. And at first I had a very closed heart to him because I didn't like him. You know, I was like, oh, he's from this hood and we beef it and there's bloodshed and brutal wars and stuff like that. But when I started to see that Pastor John was exactly like me, every single time he would get chastised or he wouldn't like certain things, like he would just want to bounce. And I wanted to leave the church many times too, because I didn't like the way they ran. I always thought it was a Korean style, right? I was like, you guys are pali pali, which means like fast paced. Everything is go, 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 super unorganized. Like those were my thoughts. And Pastor John shared a lot of those, like he felt like that, you know, and he was similar to me, but he was always the one that would share his heart with me about everything. And we would talk to each other like we were boys, you know, and he never made me feel like he was greater than me, even though at that time I wasn't a minister and he was a minister. He would treat me and really nurture me with a lot of love, and he would get it. Everybody, I'll share a story that I think is kind of crazy, and it's a little bit shameful, but I'm just being vulnerable here. One of the examples, for example, why I love Pastor John is because at this time he was a minister. We were playing basketball one time at a gym somewhere in Koreatown. And these kids, these are gym kids. There's kids that are like, you could tell that they're ballers. They've played all of their lives. They got the, you know, fit, everything. And then there's like us who are like these just Korean church kids who are like Kobe. Like they shoot like this, or they do free throws like this, underhand. And so they're like, you know, and they're missionaries. So they don't know the culture. They just love watching basketball, and they're just terrible. So these kids come in, it's like a group of African American kids, and they were just like, oh, damn, look at them. Oh, like they're kind of like joking. And mind you, this is like year 2.5 in my walk, right? Still living in church. So every activity I had to go with them. And this is what I mean when I was still carrying a gun. And this was when I exposed myself. So essentially they're making these, you know, jokes and like, yo, that guy's garbage, blah, he's, you know, whatever. And I just ignore it because I know that I'm going to get very, very angry and physical if whatever. So that day, I remember just like, whatever, I kind of ignore these kids making fun of my brothers now, right? And I'm like, it's cool. As long as they don't do anything super disrespectful, whatever. Soon as I had that thought, you know, when you play full court, it's a full court basketball game. And on one side, there's people like shooting, and on another side, there's like us playing the actual game. So, you know, it's okay. Like they know when you're pushing onto the opposite side, you can shoot a little bit, but it's common courtesy to be like, oh, they're coming back now. It's a fast break. We need to get off the court. These guys did not get off the court when we were doing a fast break. And it just so happened I'm backpedaling, so I can't see. Boom, I run into him. One of the dudes. And then, I run into him and he's just like, oh yeah, my bad. And then I got pissed. I was like, get the F off the court. And he said, what'd you say? And I was like, what? And I remember like it got heated, I was like, keep that same energy. And he was like, what? And I was like, keep that same energy. And I ran out real quick, grabbed my pistol from the car, and then came in. And then they were trying to stop me. All the church brothers. I remember one of the brothers, he was like, his name was Dwayne, and he was like, yo, it's cool, Johnny. Like, he didn't know because he's not from the streets. So he's just like, oh, he didn't know. And then he saw me clutching. And then he's like, oh, snap. And like, it was kind of scary, right? And I was like, move the F out the way. And in my mind, I mean, I'm not proud of this, but I wanted to just blow this dude away. That was my thinking. I slipped back into like my old self. And so, obviously they scatter and whatever. And, and I'm like, okay, I got to get up out of here. I got to get up out of here. So I dip out and I'm like, I'm never coming back to church because now I'm hot. I did something stupid. Shouldn't have done that. Obviously I didn't threaten, but I was about to. And I just, whatever, put it away and dipped out. And I remember one of the pastors there calls Pastor John, because me and Pastor John are like really close at this time. And he goes, Johnny Hyungjanim, brother Johnny, how he is, man. You know what he just did? This guy, man, he came with a gun, blah, 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 blah. And I remember Pastor John going, yeah, he was a gang member. It's like, what do you expect? And he goes, what? Oh, well, talk to him, blah. He's like, yeah, I'll talk to him. So he talks to me. The first thing I remember Pastor John says, Johnny, you okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm sorry, He's like, I know your real heart, bro. And I didn't have to say anything. He's like, I know, bro. Like, it's shameful. But one thing I want to tell you, bro, don't leave. And he knew. And I remember like crying, and I was like, dang, like there's people like this who know my heart. Like I wanted to run away because it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing, honestly. But he was just like, yeah, like Johnny, don't leave, like we love you, bro. It's okay. Like that's why you're in church. And then he taught me a valuable lesson. What kind of people are in church, People who are rotten, who are sinners, who cannot live life well like you. But Satan continuously condemns you, Johnny. Leave. This isn't for you. See, you're not like these church kids. You're not like these PKs. You're freaking unqualified. And then he said, but God qualifies the unqualified. I was like, yeah. He's like, whatever you do, Johnny, don't leave. There is no hope for you in the streets. There is no road for you in the streets. You will just end up dead. And that's exactly what Satan wants. Yes, you messed up, but we will protect you. We'll take care of you, and from then on, I remember my heart just really connecting to Pastor John. And I was like very thankful to that. I felt like God sends people in our lives, and God sent Pastor John in my life, and that's Isaiah's dad. And I helped raise Isaiah as a kid, and I love Isaiah. And, and he's always been the one that understands my heart more than anybody else. So, and then Pastor Han too is another pastor that was very pivotal in my life. And the reason why we need mentors in our lives is because of Pastor John, Pastor Kim, and Pastor Han. And what Pastor Han did was the same thing. I was very angry, and I remember him also telling me so many lessons. Johnny, you will be also a gospel preacher. What your mom said, he would reiterate to me. You are going to be a gospel preacher, and you will be the best gospel preacher. And mind you, this is me always wanting to run away, always feeling unqualified. Not a lot of people look like me at the church, tatted down, and obviously
not a single person looks like you.
Not a single person looks like me. Okay, and so I always felt unqualified. As a Christian, I always thought that, like, I would feel qualified at some point. What's funny is even till today, I don't feel like I'm qualified.
Really?
Yeah, but the beautiful thing is, I realize God allows that for me so that I can stay humble. Because if I sit here and I'm like, I'm qualified, look at my following, I don't think I'd be able to operate correctly. I think I would just be hella big-headed, and I would be like, you guys worked with like those industry artists,
Yeah.
like they think they're all that, and I always feel like I'm not enough. And I just feel like that also humbles me, like, because I always remember my beginnings, not in a negative, condemning way, but just like I sometimes laugh, like sit up at night and I go, damn, I'm preaching the gospel. Like, that's wild. I never thought I would do this. Jeremy, opens up his heart to me. Aaron opens up his heart to me. Like, that's kind of like wild. I was always focused on just drugs, women, cars, clothes, material lifestyle. And, now I'm in this position to steward and pour into people, similar to what Pastor, is doing and did to me. So, yeah, it's kind of wild, man.
The Pastor John story made me very emotional. It's kind of cool that, I mean, yeah, like you said, it's through God that you met people that have taught you so many insane life lessons and were so patient with you. Something you mentioned though, is you almost left the church, but what people don't know is you have left the church.
Yes.
And how many times and what point in your walk? Because, in the early walk that might make sense, but that's actually not the case. So how many times have you left church and when?
I've left like 3 separate occasions. And I basically left every single time because I wasn't exalted, because I felt like I wasn't heard, and I felt like I was okay again. Like, oh, I'm reading the Bible. The first time I left the church was because I read the Bible front to back 5 times, and I thought that I could teach pastor something. So that pride and that pastoral ego came into me. And I was like, there's some things that pastor's not saying right. I read this and I know this. And I started to recognize that, after leaving, God allowed me that time in solitude to see how will I lead my life. Now, thank God, all those times I left, I never fell back into drugs or drinking. But the beautiful thing was God was able to show me that, hey, you're around 100 homies, literally 100 of them, but you feel empty. And you being around these, I remember thinking to myself, these freaking horrible English-speaking Koreans make me happier than my homies who I grew up with since pamper status. Is crazy to me. I couldn't understand it. I couldn't fathom that. But then I recognized it was because we were different spirits. I couldn't go back to the world anymore. I was just like, dude, they're talking about, strippers and gun violence and, oh, I slid on this dude. And I'm just like, bro, that's cool and all, but like, y'all want to talk about Jesus anytime soon? Like, it was just hard.
Johnny's like, Jesus Christ.
You know the Jaden Smith meme? Can we just like talk about the socioeconomic state of the society?
Yeah, the world?
yeah.
That's
like, no kids want to talk about what I talk about. You just Jaden Smith yourself.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
Yeah. Other times that I left were conflict between, me and other pastors. It was a big thing. They would not make, I guess you could say they would start rumors, but I realized that I was living in front of man and I wasn't living in front of God. And what that means is like I was expecting and having expectations of a pastor, and which I thought were healthy expectations. And because they weren't helping me manage those expectations, I then started to judge them. And then that's what made me leave. But at the end of the day, it was all exaltation, self-exaltation, meaning self-pride, self-righteousness. You didn't do what Johnny wanted, so Johnny's out of here. Like that's how it was every single time I left. And I was the most miserable. And I remember even Pastor Kim and Pastor John teaching me this lesson together, because every time I talk to Pastor Kim, Pastor John translates. And then afterwards, Pastor John then fellowships with me and touches up on what Pastor Kim says. So it's like a double fellowship, which is amazing. But he basically told me, as right as you are, Johnny, like he reiterated, as right as you are, it directly correlates with how miserable you are. So yeah, you're right that we don't run things. We're unorganized. Maybe you're better, sure. But at the same time, you're also miserable because of it. Yeah, there are sisters and brothers who talk about you and say you're not qualified to be a minister, and you feel like they're right, so you're miserable too. So he's like, as right as you are, you're always going to be miserable, but you're not living in front of God, you're living in front of man. So you're fishing for compliments, you're opinion shopping, you're doing all these things, but what's so sad is that you don't see what God has already claimed as your identity. the person who loves you the most, which is God, you don't care about that. You're looking at like human beings, you know? And I remember Pastor Kim saying, you know, there's something that's so annoying and so disappointing and like about you, you know, he told me. And I was like, what? Like, I'm not annoying. I barely even talk. Like, what the heck are you talking about? Disappointing. He's like, you know, the most saddest thing about you, Johnny, is one thing. And I'm like, yeah. And I was getting mad. Yeah, I don't listen. Yeah, I trust myself. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And he goes, no. And I was like, what? And he goes, you know what's the most frustrating thing about you? And I was like, what? He's like, you don't believe in the identity that Christ has given you. You don't believe how great you actually are with God. And I was like, dang. And it's true. He's like, that's why you fish for compliments. That's why you search for other people. Okay, hey, am I doing good? You don't confirm your identity with God. God already chose you. And I'm like, how? You know, he goes, he sent his son to die for you. Like, he chose you over his son. If it was me, because he has a son, I'm not sending my son for anyone here. But God sent his son, even though you're supposed to die, he killed him. Don't you think he chose you? And I was like, whoa, that's wild. And so he's like, but you don't believe that. You just continuously, oh yeah, I'm a gang member. Oh yeah, I'm this. And you're like, he said, you're like a bird or like an eagle that just hops on the ground and doesn't use his wings. And I was just like, oh my gosh, every single time Pastor Kim says stuff like that, it makes me emotional because I'm just like, dude, like, you're right. I have nothing else to say. He's like, you don't conform to your identity. You don't take it. You're just like, oh, my thoughts, my thoughts, my thoughts, my thoughts. And he's like, that's what limits you the most. And then I remember him yelling at me, what are so good about your thoughts? Why do you love them so much? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I was like a little kid, you know, I don't know. And I'm like crying. But yeah, I'm so thankful for these pivotal figures in my life. And mentors are very important. Pastors, the right pastor is very important. Gospel-centered, you know, salvific pastor is the most important thing into pouring into people.
All this time you're living in the church and you don't want to be a minister. When did that start to change? And then, yeah, when did you realize that that's the journey you wanted to take?
It kind of just crept up on me. You know, I never wanted to be a minister. And I just was happy being a brother. I've seen how ministers are. They literally watch over people. I'm like, I'm not micromanaging, but I can't even manage my own life. Like, what the heck? They, you know, people call them at 2 a.m, having panic attacks and anxiety. I'm like, man, I'm not built for this. I'm way too selfish. I would see a phone call and be like, oh, I'm going straight back to sleep. You know, like, so I was just being real. I'm like, I'm not ready for that. But I didn't realize that pastor was cultivating that in me. It was like, Johnny, you know, the foundation of spiritual life, the foundation of life in general is to serve other people. Thinking about other people above yourself is so foundational because let's say you work, he says, and he used an analogy of if you're working and you want to work a little bit and gain a lot, that's called a scam artist. Do you think people, let's say you hire somebody, let's say you have a company and you hire somebody who just works a little and takes shortcuts, like that's going to overall affect everything and they're going to get cut sooner or later. But if you're a person who's like, you know what, even though I work at Target, this is my target and I'm going to treat it like I own it and I need to serve people with it. And I'm going to clean the shelves and I'm going to do this. He's like, those people will rise up. So you work a lot to gain a little, whereas a lot of people work a little to gain a lot. And it's not this not work harder yet smarter type of thing. He just wanted me to recognize that you are so stubborn and most people are so selfish and so self-centered that they end up breaking even good relationships. And he was training that in me. So when he was teaching me just by working and serving people, naturally it was cultivating me to then go to theology school, which I did, to then go and do seminary and things like that. And so he just would lean it in. Hey, you should sign up for seminary. Remember, Johnny, and he would always go back to that. True happiness comes from serving people. If you're around someone who's selfish all the time, have you ever been around someone who's right all the time and selfish all the time? How does that work out? He's like, no one wants to be around them. He says, but then if you serve people and you're always helping people, they flock to you and they will help you, you know? He's like, people who help people get helped. And then he says, hurt people, change people, right? Helpful people help people and they get helped too. You know what I mean? So it's like the way he explained it all, I was like, wow. So that is ingrained in me now. Doing our Titanic 3-hour lives. Like, why do I do those things? Try to answer every single question is solely because of Pastor Kim, you know, teaching, guiding people, sacrifice. You know what I'm saying? You guys know it when we're like, let's do
100%.
Austin, let's do this. And I'm just like, let's do it. Even if we have to get 0 in the bank account, let's do it, you know? And it's because that mindset then allows us to like help people and then they will in turn bless us back. That's just how it is. And we're not there just for the blessings, right? But the byproduct of like blessing and, you know, things like that is actually putting other people above yourself. And of course I had struggles with that. Well, what if it's the wrong person and they just take advantage of me, right? I would ask Pastor that. And he goes, that's when faith has to come in. I said, what do you mean? He said, don't you think, Johnny, that if a person is stepping all over you, for example, but your core foundation is still servitude, you don't think that God would remove that person or change that person? Like they would stop doing those things to you. So it was a twofold lesson. It was serving people to be Christ-like because he served people. He didn't have to die for us. He took off his robe of righteousness, came down and died for our sins, even though he knew people would go against him, mock him, not even believe in him, call him a prophet like the Muslims do. He thought about us to get us to heaven. He's like, you don't believe that God would then change your, you know, trajectory, change the people in your life. And I've seen it happen where I always feel like, man, my homie's going to use me. But in the end, my friends change their hearts and go, man, out of everybody, bro, like you're the only one that really like believed in me and trusted me. Little did they know I was trusting in God who would lead everything, you know? So I used the same test or the same lesson that Pastor taught me to now, you know, help other people, like relationships, for example. When I see women are like, I need to see his DMs, I need to see his thing, like I need to see where he's at, right? And I'm like, sister, listen, can you be around your man 24/7? Of course not. But God is around him 24/7, and you're a believer. Why don't you believe that God will hold on to him too? And if you trust in God with your marriage or your relationship, you wouldn't do these types of things. You'd be more peaceful. And the ones who listen to me are always more peaceful. And their husbands are like, dang, you're off my case. Like, you let me relax when I come home. As men, we just want to come home and chill after a hard day of work. Not get nagged, not get told, you know? And so I see like even his lessons cross over into like my life and how I nurture people and mentor people and stuff. So it's kind of crazy. Yeah.
How long was theology school? But also, like, on top of theology school, you went to Liberia. Like, what I'm trying to really show people is it was 8 years before the soft white underbelly interview. And that's this first part we just talked about was everything from like carving out that old person. It was starving the old person of who Johnny was. Yeah. And now to me, the next chapter is like really building your biblical knowledge, right? Yeah. When I see you on live and anytime I come to you and I ask you a question, you always start with a verse. You give me some advice and you throw me a Bible verse. That's what impresses a lot of people. Yeah. So let's talk about the middle part of really where you developed your biblical knowledge.
Yeah. So through pastor, obviously, I chose a school, like 4 years, I would say, give or take. And then after that, in between all of that, I was obviously going to get my chaplaincy. I was going to prison ministry. That within that 4-year span, I was like overworking myself. And I was to the point where I wanted to leave again because I was just like, dude, you're making me do theology school and I'm doing this chaplaincy. I still got to go to hospices. I got to go to convalescent homes. I still got to wake up at 4:30 in the morning. I'm still waking up at 4:30 in the morning today. I mean, it's like, what the heck is this, you know? And he would never lie to me. He would never be like, oh, this is the end. Don't worry. Just after 4 years, you'll be okay. No, he was like, this is a lifestyle. You know, this is what it comes down to. Because you can't manage your life. We have to live this way. And so, you know, I thought I was in a cult. I mean, I went through all of these things. You know, what are they trying to do? But again, it always came back to all of these things were good for me. Because let's say I didn't grind hard for those 4 years. I didn't have this crazy schedule. You guys know the way we work is like wild. We're literally like doing podcasts, we're shooting back-to-back episodes, we're doing all kinds of stuff. If I wasn't trained in that way, I'd probably be like, oh no, I don't want that.
You'd be grumpy. You're a workhorse, I will say that.
Right. So that's all cultivated by Pastor. And it was because he saw the vision. He was like, dude, Johnny's gonna get used, And so, and I'll share a story about that after, but essentially 4 years, and then Liberia, short-term missionary for 6 months. I went there, and it was crazy, and then obviously it led up to just me preaching the gospel everywhere I went.
What you're also known for is understanding the original lexicon of the Bible.
Yeah.
Why Coney Greek? Why learn Hebrew Aramaic? Also, people should know this. You're one of the few at your church that, I assumed because you knew it. I'm like, oh, they probably teach us that at church, but that's actually not the case.
That's not
Why
true.
did you want to learn Coney Greek and Hebrew Aramaic?
Because I remember there was words in Korean and even in Chinese Mandarin that you cannot translate accurately to English or another language. You'd have to go to this thing, like nunchiba, for example, in Korean. How do you explain that? Awareness? That's not what it is, though. You get what I'm saying? So I knew that the Hebrew, and this is Pastor, he was saying if you look at Korean, it's really close to Hebrew, which I was kind of shocked. That's what he was saying. And I was like, interesting. And I'm like, I'm not trying to learn Korean. I understand some of it, but
Hater.
I'm sorry.
We're number one.
But basically, I was like, all right, I'm just going to look at Hebrew. So there's the esoteric Hebrew, right? And there's the older version of Hebrew, the older version of Greek, which is Coney Greek. And I'm like, okay, so Hebrew is written, the New Testament is written in Hebrew, Aramaic. Coney Greek is written for the New Testament. And I was like, okay, so what should I do? And at that time, I was Googling stuff. And I actually found people who were biblical, messianic Jews who believe in the Messiah, and they know a lot of Hebrew. They also know some of the Coney Greek. And I actually ended up taking my some money that I had saved up, and I was paying this guy $1,500 a month to teach me everything, to give me deep Bible unlocks and things like that. So $20 a month, guys, $6 a month is nothing, okay? $1,500 a month to learn all this knowledge, man. And I was able to see man, there's so many things that you have to understand in Hebrew, which is alphanumeric. It means letters mean numbers and numbers mean letters, that you would never catch if you just read the Bible the way that it is. So I encourage everybody to learn that. But again, you don't have to, because it depends on your heart. There are some people who will learn that and then take it to then thump people and argue from a point of authority and be like, I'm better than you. That's not what we're about. We're about advancing the gospel. So I would get confused because I'm like, well, Hebrews chapter 10, NIV says this, KJV says otherwise. One is in present tense, one is in past tense. So I was like, let's go to the original, because if you go to the original, that's going to be what it is. And it would be in past tense. And I'll be like, oh, I'm so thankful I learned that. So obviously I'm not fluent in it, but I would learn, I would ask him. He was more like a resource to just ask him. And then he would teach me. And he's a good teacher because he would tell me, if you're going to learn a language, don't learn all of the useless things. Learn conversation. And he's like, try to do it in your, you know what I mean? Your testimony, do it in Greek. Your testimony, do it in Hebrew, And I'll be honest, I'm not a good person. I don't study well. So I didn't do that. I didn't follow him. Okay, my bad. But I did learn what he said was the next thing is learning the most important things. Sin, pistis, which is faith, akoe, which is hearing, all these different words to then explain certain concepts and things like that, So, and yeah, our church doesn't really do that. That was just an offshoot of something I thought of. And I ran it by a pastor, and he's like, yeah, just don't look at me to give you $1,500 a month to pay somebody, but it was very invaluable. It proved to me that, wow, and all the stuff that I learned is all poured into me by other people. So yeah, I learned that, and just a bunch of things, the gematria, all these different things and even church history. Like I learned a lot of church history from my pastors, but I also learned from, those rabbis and, their Talmudic sages and all these different things. I'm just like, dude, what is all of this stuff? And yeah, as you take time to learn these things, at the end of the day, you'll recognize something. Because I went through a phase of like analysis paralysis, where I would sit there and whoa, and then I get stuck. And I'm like, this is so much. And like felt like my brain was gonna pop, literally. And then I realized, and this is why I love Pastor Kim and Pastor John. They're like, dude, you can know all this stuff, but you'll be like E.T. And I'm like, E.T., like, E.T. phone home, big old head, little body. You're not moving by faith. You're just like, I know this, E equals MC squared, blah, blah, blah. Do you know about the wise men? But you're not doing anything to advance the kingdom. And that humbled me a lot. Yeah, I can pay money and have people pour knowledge into me. But knowledge in itself without faith, and if you don't walk by faith, is useless. It actually makes you a Pharisee. It makes you detrimental to the gospel, and it makes you judge everybody and place yourself on a higher pedestal, and you're not saving souls. You're like closing hearts. So I coined the term, right? Don't win arguments, win souls, right? I was trying to win arguments, and I even went through that phase of like very Pharisaical. Well, how many wise men are there? Well, 3. No, they brought 3 gifts. There's a whole group. See, you're unqualified. You can't teach. Right there, I'll just close people's hearts. I was the original heart closer. Jeremy is heart closer 2.0.
I'm the Kobe.
Right? So,
Jordan and Kobe.
And if you guys like questions like this, we do a free live event called After Service, where we do sermons, live Q&As, and fellowship. To RSVP for a city near you, text afters to the number below. See you guys there.
You don't have any questions about Coney Greek or Hebrew Aramaic?
No, he's the original Jew.
He's Greek too.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, he's literally the
Aaron
original.
is the walking Bible.
Yeah. Yep.
That's what he
What's
is.
your favorite Bible verse?
Why you put him on the spot?
Hebrews 10:14.
Recite it.
All I know is that's Johnny's favorite, so I'll let him have the honor.
Funny.
I have a question.
Yes.
I really do have a question.
Yeah, say it into the mic. Swing it around. Caleb.
So what's the difference between how pastor communicated with you and now how you're communicating with other people?
It's similar only, okay, so the way that I communicate with people and when to know when to keep it real with somebody versus when to nurture them and gain their hearts, as I say, is dependent solely on if there's ego or pride involved. So if people are fighting with you, then we have to check them. But if they're fighting for you, then that's different. So fighting for somebody means you guys are coming together with a common goal, right? And I'll use an example of like a relationship, right? I do a lot of marriage counseling and like one-on-ones with couples. And normally when they're fighting, it's never fighting for each other. It's always fighting with each other. Well, honey, I'm right. And I told you not to do that. And you didn't validate my feelings. And then the other person's like, no, I'm right. You didn't validate my feelings. I validated your feelings last week. And it's this constant, like nothing is getting moved. It's tit for tat, right? So I've learned to tell people to fight for people, not with people. Hey, we're both wrong. What is this actually going to do? It's counterproductive. Yes, I messed up. Now let's find a way to move this forward. That's a little bit different. So when pastor would talk to me and he would chastise me, it was always when I was exalted or egotistical. Well, pastor, the way you guys run this stuff, blah, 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 blah. He's like, okay, then you try to run a 300-man church. And I'll just stop talking, right? He goes, Johnny, why can't you pray for people? So he'll advance the thing. Don't you believe that God would also run this church? Because this church you keep thinking is human beings operating it. This is God's church. If you have an issue with the pastor, not a problem. Why don't you go and seek God about it to change that person's heart? And I'm like, oh, so you're already crooked foundationally. You want people to do things your way. Do you think as a Christian we're supposed to mold to God, or are we going to mold God to our standards? And this was him fighting for me. So it was never you're dumb, you took this long to learn this. It was always like, Johnny, where's your heart posture? And that's also what I do too. When you guys, let's say, argue about certain things, you guys are also advancing core of the heart. I don't say anything. But if it's like, no, you're this and you're that, then I'll be like, all right, guys, let's move forward, because then it's just pointless, right? So anything that is counterproductive or not advancing the kingdom, as we say, I will check it right away. And that's why people look at my Instagram lives and they're like, Johnny, how come you treat this person this way and then you treat this other person softly? It's not because I favor people. I'm looking at the posture of a person's heart. If they come in and they go, you're a false prophet, you don't believe in dreams and tongues and visions, I'm going to go at them because they made a statement instead of questioning, versus someone who goes, hey, Johnny, I've read Acts 2:17. Could you clarify as to why Joel and Peter are talking about dreams and visions here, but you said that there's no dreams and visions? It's a different posture. I won't be like, don't say anything. How many times you read the Bible? I wouldn't just go like that. But the ones who come in here with an egotistical, prideful heart, even Jesus in Matthew 21, 22, and 23 calls them hypocrites, called them brood of vipers, snakes, basically. And he checks the people who have that type of pharisaical heart. Now, most people don't have a pharisaical heart. They'll just be like, hey, I have a question. Why did you say this? Could you clarify? That's the right heart to have. And then secondly, I also kind of gauge, this is just me personally, what I've learned dealing with so many people and how I'm going to speak to people is, just because someone is ignorant does not translate directly to disrespect. Like, they may just not know what it is, and it doesn't mean they're disrespecting you. You get what I'm saying? So I've learned, like, if they don't know and I can see that they genuinely don't know, it would be wrong of me to be like, you're stupid. Like, I would be judging them, right? It's my job to also kind of lead them in that way and be like, hey, you may not know that this is happening. Let's hash it out. Let's talk about it. So yeah, a lot of people, misinterpret that too. Like, you don't know that? Well, you're disrespecting me. How could you not? And that's not true.
I love that. Yeah, they say don't misinterpret malice for something that can be attributed to ignorance.
Yeah.
So it's like, don't just think that someone's being mean or horrible. They just don't know.
Yeah.
They're worried about themselves.
Caleb, did that answer your question?
Mm-hmm.
We got like 15 minutes left.
Okay.
And I want to kind of close the ending of the journey here.
Yet.
How did you get the Soft White Underbelly interview?
So actually, shout out to Mohawk Matt. He and Cinemills TV, they actually put me on. Mohawk Matt was a white dude, but from a Mexican hood in San Fernando Valley, and he ended up, doing I think a couple episodes with Soft White Underbelly, and then Asher too, which is the guy that plugged in Matt, I believe, to Mark Laeta. He kind of screened me and was like, all right, and we just made the connection there. So Cinemills.
But what's the screening like? So they just met you on the street and they're like, hey, you got a cool story. Like,
No. So Matt, I was doing things with Sullen, the clothing brand, and Matt was like one of their spokesperson, like representatives. And he's been to prison too. He's been through a lot of stuff, shout out to him. But he basically, him and Asher were pretty close, and Asher was screening people for Mark. Because Mark, he does like 10 interviews a day, and out of the 10, he chooses one. He's a workhorse too. He's crazy, right? He has an office in Skid Row and has one in Santa Monica. We're very, very close too. But he, so I met him, and he just looked at me and he goes, all right, let's do it. We get there. And
he was like, face tattoo. All right, you fit the part.
No.
The stool.
No. But the thing is, this is a crazy backstory, and he'll say this too. He was not gonna air my episode because he cried behind the camera, right? Mark cried when he saw me like get emotional about my father, saying sorry to my abuser, this and that, and reconciliation and forgiveness. He was crying, bro, and he was like, "That is such a deep story." But then I start leaning into Romans 3, Hebrews 10, and he doesn't believe in God like that, right? So he was just like, yeah, I was going to just cut your interview, man. But it was just so good that I just threw it up and was like, if my fans don't like it, whatever. I liked it, so I'm going to just do that. And Mark is a gangster like that. Mark, he will spend money, like he'll send somebody 10 G's because he likes him. Like the guy's like, I want 10,000 or buy me a car. He'll just do it, and he won't make it public, and he'll let people just come on because he's such an artist at heart, So yeah, he threw it up there, and it went crazy. Obviously, Yeah.
That's so crazy. So wait,
God.
I have two questions. The first is, what was your life like right before this happened? Like, what was happening at the time, like day to day? And then how long did it take after you did that until it started getting views and people started to potentially recognize you? Or what was that like?
Prior to the software Underbelly, I went on 2 podcasts before that. I went on Pade Young's podcast and I went on Lucky Sun Tzu, right? Hoodstock's Lucky. And, really solid individuals, both been to prison. Pade went to YA as well, so we had that connection. And yeah, it was like getting some views. It was getting 100,000, 200,000 views, which is a lot, And then when I jumped on Software Underbelly, it just blew up completely. But prior to that, I was still prison ministry, convalescent homes, hospice, going to the hospitals, praying for people, going on the tiers, praying for people, like just being a chaplain.
But were you thinking about social media at all?
No.
It never crossed your mind?
No. I did have an Instagram, but I had 200 followers. Yeah, it was like a trapstagram, seriously. And I was just there to follow my homies, and my homies were following me. And then I was like, yeah, whatever. I actually didn't want to go on these podcasts, to be honest, because I was, as Asians, we're very hush hush, and you're not supposed to talk in front of camera. And I knew that my homies would feel some type of way. And they watched me from the first podcast to Lucky's podcast, and then the soft white. They saw that. So they knew that I was a solid individual. I was not going to talk about cold cases, closed cases, open cases, none of that. I was just telling my testimony. And so when that blew up, overnight, I remember my homies, my youngsters, like, yo, Johnny, you got 1 million views in a day. And I was like, what? And they linked it, and it was, and I looked, and it was. And then the other homie was like, bro, your comments are 99% positive. Whereas most comments online are very toxic. It's 50%, right? And so they were like, oh my gosh, beautiful testimony. Who is this guy? And then, and then Mark hits me up and he goes, did you see your views? And I said, yeah. He goes, man, I didn't want to put it up. He's like, I'm really glad I did. That's how he said it. And he's like, the most commented comment is, you're handsome. And I was dying when he said that. He's like, you're handsome. Who is this handsome Asian guy? And then I was just like, they're fetishizing me. No, I'm just kidding. But I was just really thankful, and from then on, I started to get noticed more, and a lot of people would notice me time to time, at the gym or in certain areas where East LA, San Gabriel Valley, where there'll be hood people, and they would notice me from Lucky's podcast, which is Hoodstocks. And then, I hit Soft White, and it hit just random people, right? And I remember at the gym, somebody kept staring at me, and I had PTSD, right? So I was like, oh, this dude's gonna hit me up. He's a gang member, and I'm tatted down. I'm ready for it. So he walked up to me and, with this little gangster strut, and he's like, are you Johnny Chang? And I was like I snapped out of the gangster mode, and I was like, oh yeah. And I felt so stupid because I was like, I think this guy's dogging me out, but he's actually seeing me and approached me, shook my hand, and he's like, bro, love your testimony, homie. I went through the same places. I was on a 4-yard too. I was Calipat, woo woo. He was telling me his story too. And that was the first memorable thing was I was like, dang, this dude's blasted. And he's walking up to me, and I thought he was trying to trip on me, but he wasn't. He was giving me my flowers. And I was just so thankful about that. And then it just, one thing led to another. I had old white ladies come up to me, I wish my son can watch your interview, stuff. And it was just beautiful. And I was like, wow. And then it just started steamrolling after that. So a year after that, we've started to kind of I did book Johnny Chang. I started to, make my own Bible studies. And now it's we're at 785,000 followers. Everywhere I go, I pretty much, I'm sure Jeremy and you can attest to this. We get stopped at least by 1-2 people every single time we go out. And they know me by my name, which is crazy.
When did the episode drop, and when did Under the Influence reach out to you? How many months was that?
Oh, I
2
forgot.
months?
I think a few months, actually. Maybe 3 to 4 months.
Nice.
Yeah, and mini me, which is Vit, reached out to me, and and that one, some people come up to me about that too.
Personally, it changed my life. That interview changed my life.
Amen.
since then I've been going to your church. I've learned from Pastor Kim. He's the GOAT. And you've changed my life in so many ways. I now work with you, building Core of the Heart. So I'm extremely grateful that
I know.
that's off. It's so crazy to me that software, he almost didn't post that interview.
Yeah.
And if he did in some alternate reality, I'd probably be just some unhappy slump
Amen.
moping around, just a sad meat bag moping around this earth.
Amen.
Stuck with him.
Amen.
And-
Chair
just
Bear.
kidding.
Yeah, that's fire, man. I'm thankful. I'm thankful to Mark and thankful to God that He brought all of us together. And at the end of the day, it was just trusting in the servant. And when things didn't make sense to me, I just trusted. And you guys do the same. There's things that don't make sense, when I say, and then you guys trust me, and then it works. And it's vice versa, right? You guys come in, you do the marketing stuff. I don't know anything about that. Trust me, just do this. I'm like, okay, whatever. Turn on the camera, do this. Okay, whatever. And I'm just
Dance, monkey, dance.
yeah, basically, right? And then it allows us to preach the gospel at such a level that I never even dreamed of.
It's going to be global. Core
And it's
of
gonna
the
be-
Heart is going to be global. If you guys subscribe to the podcast, join the Discord, you can say that you were here first.
It's a movement for sure, so I'm just very thankful that a person like me can preach the gospel and reach so many people. And I never felt like I was qualified, and I never wanted to do this. But Pastor Kim even said that was biblical. He's like, Moses would always complain, I'm slow in tongue, bring Aaron, I don't want to do it. He murdered somebody. King David, Saul, none of these people were qualified. Saul turned into Paul and preached the gospel to the ends of the earth. He was persecuting and killing Christians. So I just realized it's very on par with the Bible. I never wanted to be this way. And it's just so cool that so many people recognize me. People cry,
Change their lives. They see so many people that come to you with their testimonies.
Yeah. It's all
And so
God.
it's working, which is awesome. Do you have a final word? And ultimately, thank you for doing this episode. I just really wanted people to see how hard, what the journey was actually like, because so many people kind of revere you in a lot of ways, and they think the journey is easy. And also Johnny really lives this life. What he took to get to this point, he continues to live that way. And you're an amazing leader, and you guide this community. And I see how much you break your heart for people. And yeah, so we're very grateful for you.
And yeah, I just think this episode is a great testament of how you never signed up for the social media game. Yeah. Most people you see online right now, 99% of people plus, they've dreamed about this. They've been working every day for the last 10 years for something very similar. And it's just very interesting that you didn't really play that game at all. You kind of fell into it, and here we are because the word. And it's just everything happens for a reason. So it's just interesting that it really happened to work out perfectly for you.
Fire.
Yeah.
It is literally a story written by God.
Yeah.
There's no other explanation than God.
100%. I agree. Amen, guys.
Yeah,
Please
well-
comment, subscribe.
Yeah, close us out.
Yeah. So it's the end of our second episode, guys. I hope you guys really enjoyed it. And if you did enjoy it, please comment, subscribe. Link in the bio. Unlearned Wisdom. Check it out.